It's okay. You don't want to hear me anyway, right? You're all here for Brandon. I know where I stand. Yeah! I have approximately 0.4% of this audience in my corner. That's fantastic. Anyway, how y'all doing? Yay! Cool. So, what's up?
Hey, is this is doing something?
Work?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, let us know when they start working. I'll just use professor voice. So periodically they just stick Dan and me on panels, and sometimes they give us a topic, and sometimes we just say, no, we're not going to do that.
Who's here for the reading throwdown?
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't even know what that means.
Yeah.
I texted Brandon, I'm like, what is this? And he said, I don't know, let's just tell stories about each other. So.
We will do a reading. We'll each do like a 10-minute reading as part of this. I don't know if it'll be a throwdown, but we will pull out something to read.
We could make it a throwdown by heckling each other.
That's true, yeah. We could make faces at each other while we're reading.
Just very dramatic eye rolls.
So if you guys don't know why they would stick the two of us on panels, Dan and I were in college together 20 years ago. Does that make you feel old now, Dan?
More than 20.
Yeah, 25 years ago.
We met in 98, so 22.
Yeah.
I've known him longer than I've known my wife. And there was a certain point at which I had shared a bed with him more often than I've shared one with my wife.
Yeah. For a while, we went to cons together quite extensively. Like during those early years when we were very poor and very young and very new, we attended a lot of World Fantasy conventions and World Cons together. We would usually drag one or two of our friends along to make them help pay for hotel rooms. We told them it would be fun, but really it was Dan and Brandon trying to get published, and they were just subsidizing that.
Yeah, so my roommate in college, and then later his roommate in college, is a guy named Ben. He's not a writer. We drag him along to everything, and we never told him, you're here to pay 1/3 of the hotel room.
Yeah. And to watch bad movies with us at midnight, so we could tackle them. Ben is still in my writing group, which is just, he's awesome, but it's hilarious that my writing group is full of writers and a computer programmer, right? Who hasn't written a story since it was required of him in Dave Wolverton's class 20 years ago when we took it. That's the last time he wrote anything. And it's even funnier because I stick a lot of... this is turning into us tell stories about Ben.
Who here knows Ben?
Yeah, oh good.
Dan does.
But a lot of people from my writing group are in my books. Dan's in Mistborn, and a lot of people make appearances, and Ben has always refused. He said, you can't put me in your books. And so I started only putting him in the acknowledgments, but I started spelling his name wrong each time in a different way. So if you look through my acknowledgments and there's some weird Ben person there's some joke about his name, that's who he is.
I don't think I've ever put you in one of my books.
Yeah, I let you live, right?
That's right. So who's read Mistborn? Like 2 or 3 of you. So there's a sergeant named Wellen. And anytime Vin or whoever shows up and is like, I'm gonna murder 70 soldiers all at once, Wellen is the one that survives.
Yep.
And I think that happens in all 3 of the original Mistborns.
He just, you'll get a viewpoint, I think, in the second one from him. He's just standing there, shocked, looking around at everyone dead. He's like, what happened?
Oh, you know what I did do with you, though? I also run a D&D campaign on Twitch, where all of the players are other authors, and he was going to do it with me, but he's too important.
No. I'll tell you why I don't do it, but let you finish your thing.
So one of the groups that they were messing with, one of their enforcer, their thug, was an Etten, which is a creature with 2 heads. And I named the 2 heads Brander and Sander. party hasn't actually met Brander and Sander yet, but it's coming up. It's going to be awesome.
No, you put your thing on my date night with my wife.
I know.
The one night a week she actually can guarantee that I'm going to hang out with her.
She is welcome to join the campaign as well.
She actually watched an episode, and she said, I was so confused. Like, it's okay. She has never role-played before. She had no idea what was going on. She said, they're funny, but I don't know what they're doing.
We have Howard Taylor is on the show, and Charlie Holmberg is on the show, and she's like half his age and 7 or 8 times his energy level.
And Howard's got a lot of energy.
So when Charlie rolls a critical hit and starts twerking at the camera, Howard's like, what's going on? What do I do? It's awesome.
So we're going to run part of this as just kind of shooting questions at each other, and hopefully it'll spin us into weird stories here and there. You, Dan, are doing a lot of audiobooks right now.
Yes, I am.
Why are you doing a lot of audiobooks? What's going on with that?
The short answer is because Audible is the one willing to pay me for them. The longer answer is I started writing a couple of different things. I decided a few years ago, because I always try new genres. I have published so far horror and thriller and science fiction and fantasy and post-apocalypse and like mythic fantasy and all these different things. And I realized a few years ago, I've never done middle grade and I've never done historical fiction. And I love both of those, and I read historical fiction almost exclusively. And so I decided to try them, and they were different enough from my normal stuff. Maybe that's why the editors wouldn't go for them, because we took it's middle grade science fiction, and we took it around, and everyone's like, no, we don't want this. But Audible did, and so I've got 3 Audible originals now, and they're super cool. And they have full cast and music and sound effects and everything, and they're so much better than Brandon's books. Like, I don't know how I can emphasize that. Not in terms of quality, but in terms of efficiency. Right? A middle grade book is 35,000 words long. I can write it in a month and then get paid just normal book rate for it. Whereas a Stormlight book is like 500,000 words long and is written on the backs of like mystical goats. It takes 10 years, and so who's got the better business model now?
I'll have you know that those mystical goats, they make very good pets, and we get goat's milk. So, I mean, I get cheese. That's
mystical
pretty efficient.
Goat cheese.
Mystical goat cheese. No, audiobooks are have become a real deal. Like, we thought they were a real deal before, but it's the only growth segment of the market right now, at least what I've seen. Like, Starsight, my last book, was 17% print.
Whoa.
17% print, and then something like 33% ebook and 50% audiobook or something like that. Like, just insane numbers. And we have been, for a while, we've been split 20% print and kind of basically 40% audio and 40% ebook. And that audiobook has started to grab some of the ebook share and even a little bit more of the print share. So yeah, audiobooks, they are a major force right now. Now, I think I might be overrepresented in audiobooks because you spend an Audible credit on an audiobook regardless of whether it's 15 hours or 55 hours.
Mine, to be fair, are 4.5 hours long.
Well, yours are the audio originals though. So if they go buy a book, like they buy I'm Not a Serial Killer or a Stormlight book, they can get yours for free, right?
That's true.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
And the thing about this industry, publishing, first of all, is the dumbest industry in the world. But second, it is in a state of constant disruption. We broke in 12, 13, 14 years ago.
2005 was my first one, and you came out like 2007?
2009.
2009, okay.
In America, at least. In 2005 and in 2009, and even bleeding into like 10 or 11, you could not give away your audio rights. Because an audiobook back then was, imagine a Stormlight Archive book where you have to put it on cassette tapes. And it would be like the size of this table. It would be an entire shelf in a library. And they were expensive to produce, and they were ridiculous to haul around. And then somebody someday was like, hey, look, MP3s. And then instantly they became massive, and they have only continued to grow.
Yeah, it's really been...
Were you checking your phone while I was talking?
I'm looking for my reading. You were doing it earlier.
Dan's talking now. I got some stuff to do.
Yeah. No, you say that publishing has been in a constant state of what you call disarray or flux. It's been in a constant state of collapse since the 1920s, as I'm led to understand. Like when I broke in 2005, I was hearing all this doom and gloom. Everything's going to collapse. This big thing. Back then, it was the collapse of the distribution chains, which were consolidating, and so the industry is changing, and it's full of introverts, the businesses who just want to sit and read their books, who really don't care about the business side and are a little bit anxious by the fact that there is a business that they're involved in. And so any change is just like, we're all going to lose our jobs, everyone's going to stop reading, and they're only going to play video games from now on. And so they were worried about that, and I actually asked my agent once, I'm like, is this real? And he's like, no, this has been happening since the 20s, right? Yeah. Like, it probably even goes back to like Dickens and things, where it's like, we are in a constant state of everyone thinks that publishing's a bubble, and no one actually wants to read. And that it's all going to collapse. And, these days it's that Amazon owns everything, which is pretty legit. Like, last year my agent said to me, he said, we really have one customer. It's not your fans, it's Amazon. Because Amazon controls just an enormous amount of the market. They own Audible, so they're 80% of audiobooks, they're like 93% of ebooks, and they're like 50% of print books. So, so now that's what everyone's panicking over.
Yeah. The only real constant in all of those time of publishing, things are constantly changing, things are constantly collapsing. The one and only thing that has remained true year over year is that vampire books are on their way out.
Yeah.
And everyone will always tell you, at the height of the popularity of Anne Rice, nope, vampire books are on their way out. Yep. Twilight sold like more books than, I don't know, anything in the world. Vampires are on their way out.
Yep. Constantly.
They're always going. Mm-hmm. Don't even bother.
Yeah.
Speaking of Tor, though, speaking of everyone, we're both published by Tor, and we used to make fun of them because they were, as he described, book people, not business people. And someone, maybe it's your agent, who used to describe them as Tor is what happens at a publishing company with no adult supervision.
Yeah.
And so we love them. I love everyone who works there. They're all great. But they are book people. They're not business people. And we used to make jokes about that. And then last week, as I was looking over the Writing Excuses finances, I realized, oh my gosh, we did the same thing. We have really run our business very poorly.
Well, we are the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. My poor wife, right? My poor wife, who was an English major and a school teacher, married into something she was not anticipating, because we have like 12 employees now, and we have to be like real adults and like have things like workers' comp and all of this stuff, and it's really intimidating. Nobody warns you, right? You're like, I'm an author. I'm just gonna write my stories and sit in my basement, and I'm gonna go on trips occasionally, very cheaply because I can't afford anything because I'm a writer, and experience the world and write about it, and that's my life. No one warns you that you're starting a small business, which you really are, and so. That was actually...
This is a very large business at this point.
I don't know. Like, I'm still considered a small business by legal terms,
That's
right?
True.
Like, we still have, like, I think it's like 20 employees where you stop being a small business or something like that. But even early on when it was just me and Emily and Peter, right, where we had one employee, it was very... Even before that, right, when I started writing books, I'm like, all right, now you got to file a 1099 and you got to pay self-employment tax. And I'm like, self-employment tax? What? I'm a writer. I'm an artist. I don't have to do this. They're like, well, unless you want to be a writer and artist in prison, then you need to pay your self-employment tax.
A few years ago, I was talking to Brandon about how busy I was, and I said, I just want to get to the level of fame where I can sit in my bathrobe and write books, and I never have to go out and tell anybody to buy them because they just will. And he's like a household name, and he's like, yeah, I want to get that too. It never happens.
The thing that I most wish I had done, my sister Jane is just like this, outgoing, very fashionable, very, cute, very different from me, person. And I wish when I had started this, I'd been like, all right, Jane, here's what we're going to do. Your name is going on all the books. Your picture is going in all the books.
Yes.
And then you get to go out and be very sociable and charming and tell everybody about how great the books are. And then I'll sit in my basement and hide and I'll write them. And
I would would she do mine too?
Oh man, yeah. Like that, I can't believe I didn't think of this earlier. Because it would have been so wonderful. And then, Jane is way nicer than I am, right? And Jane is like gracious and everything. And then I could just, be grouchy and write books and not have to leave my room and not have to, get dressed and just wear my pajamas. It'd be great.
So I have to tell you a story. Last night for Valentine's Day, I took my wife out to a Thai place. And one of the waiters in the back was like the Asian Brandon Ruth. The guy who plays Superman, and he was Ray Palmer in the Arrowverse and stuff. And I'm like, that totally looks exactly like an Asian Brandon Ruth. And she's like, I don't know who that is. And so I pulled out my phone to Google Brandon Ruth, and I got as far as B-R-A-N-D, and it pops up, do you mean Brandon Sanderson? You're the number one search.
In Utah. Right? You got to remember, Google is regionalized. Search results are.
So there's another Dan Wells who is an actor and a bodybuilder. And so for a long time, when you would Google Dan Wells, I was the most common text search, and he was the most common image search.
You could still do it. You could put him on your books.
I could. So, I would show up at a signing in some random bookstore somewhere, and they'd be like, oh, Dan Wells. Oh. He was on the cover of Men's Health magazine like a year and a half ago, and I went to church, and one of the guys there was like, Dan, you used to look so hot in college. And I'm like, first of all, used to, and second of all, no, that's not him. But I did write a book about cloning, and I dedicated it to him, so. And he's in it, actually, which is really fun.
Your friend or Dan Wells the model?
No, he did end up in my historical fiction, The Friend. But Dan Wells the model is in the other one.
Okay, awesome.
I put a lot of people in my books.
Yeah, you tend to kill them.
I do.
Mm-hmm. That's what I found.
We do. I used to be a scoutmaster, and we would do like a scout fundraising auction every year, and always the most popular thing was, Dan will kill you in a book. And so one lady bought it for like all 4 of her sons. It was like $400 or $500 for this fundraiser. Like, will you kill all my sons in your book? Yes, I will, but are you ready for this? And she's like, sure, how bad can it be? She was not pleased.
See, when I ask people if I can put them in my book, they say, yes, but you can't kill me. Oh yeah? All right, you're going to go. So what should we talk about, Dan?
I don't know.
We got a whole crowd here.
We got a whole crowd.
They had to raise their hands and stuff for people to sit down.
Man, should we take questions, or should we do a reading, or should I make you do this improv story pitching thing that I brought?
Well, they want to hear the reading, but maybe we should do the improv. Do you want to do questions or improv story thing? Raise your hand. Wait, raise your hand for improv story thing. All right, well, we don't have to go over that. Dan always comes up with this stuff. Like, we were doing role-playing once together, and he brought the I Ching. And he said, we're going to use the I Ching to design encounters for our role-playing session. This is like one of Dan's things. He loves improv storytelling, and I frequently will show up to a panel, and Dan has some weird thing that he wants me to do.
So at FanX last year, here at LTUE, this is like a small-time show, so they'll do the Dan and Brandon panel. FanX is the real deal, so it's the Brandon and Brandon panel. It's him and Brandon Mull.
I still sometimes want to co-author a book with Brandon Mull so that we can just have it be by the Brandons. Wouldn't that be cool? Brandon, it's weird actually. When I grew up, I was the only Brandon that I knew. And I thought it was kind of a unique name, right? In high school, I was the only Brandon. Then I moved to Utah, and there were 4 of us in my freshman dorm, and I realized, oh, it's a Mormon name. Right. And so now there's me and Mull, and his cover illustrator was a Brandon, and then there's like Brandon Flowers. There's like all of my generation, they're all like named Brandon. You're a Brandon also? Yeah, so.
A couple of years ago, I had like an impromptu high school reunion, and we were meeting all these people that we knew way back in the day, and we were introducing them to our spouses, and I was like, oh yeah, this is Mike Nelson, and this is Mike Larson, and this one over here, this is Mike Johnson. And she's like, how many Mikes do you know? And I said, I'm 42. Everyone I went to school with is named Mike. Okay, so here's how this works, okay? You have this character, and I have this plot. Okay? And and I haven't seen his card, he hasn't seen my card. You read your character, I'll read my plot, and then we are going to pitch a movie. You guys are some kind of giant, economically unfeasible collective of movie producers, okay? And we are very excited about our new screenplay that we have brought to you. So, thank you for seeing us. We're very excited to have this opportunity. We really think you're going to like this, so take it away.
Well, our movie pitch starts with a sad, sad orphan looking for a new family.
Who discovers a dangerous secret at a popular new theme park. So it's a sad, sad orphan looking for a new family. The twist is that the theme park is find your new family. And so, like,
it's a theme park built for orphans.
It's a theme park designed for orphans.
You know, this has to happen in some sort of post-apocalypse where basically everyone's an orphan, right?
It's the primary audience. It's market demands. That they do this.
Basically, you know, all the parents are dead, or all the parents who had children, their children are dead. And so they built a theme park, you know.
It's two different societies. One that's all orphans, and then one that's all like childless families.
You know, it could be some sort of weird alien thing where you were born in a test tube and you don't have a family, and then you're sent to the theme park to get your family.
Yeah, and so
I could imagine a YA dystopian that you get your family at age 16, right?
Yeah, on like a shooting gallery.
Yeah.
In a carnival. And you only got 3 points, so you're like, sorry, you gotta go with the poor one. You throw the rings and the ring toss really well, and they're like, guess what? You get to live in a mansion now.
Yeah, isn't this like your up your alley with the YA dystopian thing? You did that for a while?
Someone yesterday came to me at the book signing and was like, I really loved your YA dystopia. It's the only level-headed YA dystopia character I've ever read. Which is maybe why it didn't sell very well.
I actually kind of like this. I'm surprised no one's come up with this because for a while in YA, like, they were scrounging for every plausible dystopian society you could possibly imagine, right? It's like, all right, in the near future, wolves rule the world, and, you know, they are hunted, and for some reason they like the smell of 16-year-olds, and only 16-year-olds are killed by the wolves, and so when you turn 16, you have to run out into the forest and escape the wolves so they don't destroy society.
Very plausible.
Did you ever read Unwind?
No, I never did.
It's actually a really good book, but the premise, these YA dystopian, it's a good book, by the way. I gotta tell you, this guy's a really great writer. But the premise of these things, like when I heard the premise, Unwind is, in the future they've solved the abortion debate. by saying, all right, you can't have
I did read
abortions
this
anymore.
one.
Yeah, you can't have abortions anymore, but if you don't like your teenager, you can have them killed. Right? This is the premise of the dystopian. And so at age 16, like 16 to 18 or whatever, you can be unwound by your parents, which is, it's outlandish, but it's brilliant, because what 16-year-old doesn't think, yeah, my parents would totally have me, because you can get unwound and the spare parts are used to save other lives, and so the parents are like, oh, it's a magnanimous thing to give my 16-year-old who's annoying to the government to murder.
The thing is, I have 6 children. If that were a thing, I would only have 3 children. All right, so wait, back to the carnival.
Back to the carnival theme park.
This game also includes notes, producer notes. So I have drawn this off the top at random.
All right.
Sounds good, but can we add some more time travel? Clearly, our main character, who's trying to find a family, this poor little orphan child, he keeps bumping back and forth involuntarily between the dystopian future and the past, in which there are actual like nuclear families, and he's
Nuclear as in irradiated, or
we went the same place as soon as I said it. And when he goes back in time, something really cool happens, and I'm excited for my collaborator to tell you what it is.
Well, I had a producer ask me, what if the characters are all played by animated fruits and vegetables? Which, you know, since the producer is in the audience right now and has a lot of money, that's a really great idea.
Yes.
That, you know, we hadn't really considered the dynamic appeal of talking fruits and vegetables as characters. And so, yes.
What we're going to do is we're going to turn this into like a new retelling of H.G. Wells' The Time Machine, where there's the distant past, which is the world we live in. There's the present, which is this bizarre carnival universe. And then there is the distant future, in which we have all evolved into cucumbers.
Yep. Which, as happens, right? Cucumbers are hot right now in Hollywood. And so...
In more ways than one. But the cucumbers, they live on the surface. And then there's like the evil Morlock potatoes that live.
Yeah, so they're underground Morlock potatoes.
But they're still basically the same shape, and in the end they realize that, you know, everyone can come together and taste good in a stew.
They start going into the future to bring back the vegetables to feed the orphans. There's so many vegetables in the future.
Solve all the crises at once.
And
then everyone's like, we need to have more children because they directly increase our food supply via much time and some time travel and judicious use of not paying attention to what we're doing.
You know, this started off the rails. And then the fruits and vegetables thing happened. This is, I've never played this game before, but this is hilarious because this happens. You guys think this doesn't happen? I've been in so many pitch meetings in Hollywood where they're like, that's great, but I'd really like there to be a father-child dynamic in the story. And you're like, did you listen to the pitch that I gave you? Like, what?
Or you'll give a pitch and somebody be like, this is great, but the slot in our schedule is April. Can you turn this into an Easter movie? Yes, I can. So Brandon and I have known each other for 22 years, like we said, and since the beginning, we have talked about collaborating on some stuff. And one of the very earliest ones we wanted to do, and that I still in my heart believe we will one day write, which is the sequel to Moby Dick as written by Abraham Lincoln doing epic fantasy.
Yeah. We loved this idea. Like, we talked about it for years, and then the whole, like, Pride and Prejudice and Zombies thing happened, where, like, people were really doing stupid stuff like this. And then it became, like, a meme, and everyone was, like, smashing together historical things, and we wanted to treat it seriously. We're like, what if Abraham Lincoln were a super big fan of Moby Dick and wrote a fanfic? Because Abraham Lincoln has a really interesting, distinctive writing style, and Herman Melville has a really interesting sense of world building, and the two would make a really interesting story. Like, we were legitimately interested because we had read these two authors quite a bit in our English careers and things, and really wanted to do it, and then it became a joke that everyone was doing.
Of all the problems that that idea has, we never suspected the one that would kill it was that it wasn't innovative anymore.
Yeah.
But that project did part of the plan, because we can never do anything easy. We were going to have the entire thing annotated.
Yeah.
So it was like you'd read the book, and then there'd be all these footnotes, and then an editor would be like, "This is clearly relating to this instance in Abraham Lincoln's life." And that annotator, that historian, has actually made it into both of our books.
Cecil.
G. Bagsworth III. Is it time to do readings
It's
now?
time to do readings. So
Sweet.
You go ahead and do yours first, because I have to find mine because you wouldn't let me earlier. Are you going to make fun of me if I actually now find my reading, or do I have to read through it?
No, I'm not going to make fun of you at all.
Okay. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, of course.
Okay, so who here is a big Brandon Sanderson fan? Yeah. Okay, so we've talked about doing weird collaborations forever. We actually did one. And if you are a big Brandon fan, you have probably heard about a book called The Apocalypse Guard, right? Which is one that he's been working on for a while, and he eventually came to me and is like, "This is broken, help me fix it." And so I came in and I fixed some of it. And we went back and forth, and we did a few revisions, and we got to the point where everything's working except the magic system. And I'm not the a-hole that's going to change a Brandon Sanderson magic system. So it's on the back shelf until we get a chance to go through and have him do another pass. But I'm going to read a little bit of the first chapter to you right now. How does that sound? Okay. So it is called The Apocalypse Guard, and this is part 1, the plural of apocalypse. Chapter 1. Emma's instructions for starting a book. 1. Start with something exciting to get the reader's attention. 2. Don't start with a blog post like this one. 3. Crap, let me start over. Smoke in the air, a red sky, huddling alone in the ruins of a dying world. See, that's better already. My name is Emma, by the way. Yes, that Emma from Emma's Instructions. But unless you're one of the 6 people who follows me on Snapgram, that probably doesn't mean anything to you. So let me introduce myself. I'm 18 years old. I'm from Idaho, sort of, and I just realized that I totally got off track again. What happened to the red sky and the dying world? Well, let me tell you. Remember how I'm only sort of from Idaho? I've lived there since I was 2, but I was born in a place called Ard, which was basically like a different version of Idaho, but in an alternate reality. And if you're reading this, you need to know about alternate realities. There's Earth, and then there's an infinite number of different worlds that are kind of like Earth, but also different. Sometimes a little, and sometimes a lot. Like there's one called Hona that's mostly the same as the world you know, except instead of continents, it's all islands. Even Idaho's an island in a giant North American archipelago. Crazy, huh? So there's Hona, and there's Terra, and there's Erden and Pangea, and a bunch of others, and there used to be an Ard, but it's gone now. Because I called it a dying world before, but that was 16 years ago. Today, it is all the way dead. Burned to a crisp. And I almost burned with it, except that the Apocalypse Guard swooped in and saved me. Holy crap, the Apocalypse Guard! Why didn't I start with them? Emma's instructions for starting a book correctly. 1. Start with something exciting to get the reader's attention. 2. Like, for example, if your story includes a group of amazing heroes who travel the multiverse saving entire worlds from destruction, maybe lead with that. 3. I mean, come on. The Apocalypse Guard are based on Earth, but they hop around from world to world, stopping apocalypses. Apocalypsi. Apocalypse? That word doesn't even have a plural, because why would you ever need to talk about more than one apocalypse? Most people just get one and then boom, you're done. That's what an apocalypse is. But the Apocalypse Guard can actually stop apocalypses, and they've already stopped a bunch of them, and now we're in Erden to stop a giant asteroid, and it's amazing. important note. Did you see how I casually dropped that we in there? Now we're in Erden? That's because I'm totally a member of the Apocalypse Guard and I came here to stop an asteroid! I know it's kind of lame to type in caps lock like that, but seriously, if you were in the Apocalypse Guard, traveling to a different dimension to stop a giant asteroid, you'd totally put it in your snapgram too, and I would not say anything about your excited overuse of caps lock because I am a good friend. Which is also why I am going to stop talking about myself and start telling you the story about how we saved Erden. Starting right now. I was standing in the Apocalypse Guard Command Center looking up at the screens that showed the giant asteroid hurtling down toward the planet when Commander Visco signaled that it was time for me to do my part. Emma, she said, and waved her coffee mug toward me. I'm empty again. Okay, so my part is very small. Yes, sir! I seized the commander's mug and hurried over to the small kitchen beside the command center. I mean, I was only 18 and fresh out of high school. It's not like I was going to be out there flying around in a power rig, draining kinetic energy from an extinction-level space rock. I was a cadet, and this was still very early in my training, so coffee was all they let me do. One pot of coffee was already brewing on the counter, but we had about 40 people in the command center, each with their own station and responsibility, so I got a second pot going just in case. To tell you the truth, I was a coffee-making genius, which is weird because I don't drink coffee. I'm not just from Idaho. I'm from Iona, Idaho, population 1,803, approximately 1,802 of whom are in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, including me. So I don't drink coffee, but you know what I can do? I can follow instructions. It's practically a superpower. Though I guess if you followed me on Snapgram, you already knew that. Emma's instructions for perfect coffee. 1. Follow the freaking recipe. 2. Serve it way hotter than you think it should be. 3. Never talk about how bad it smells. I know a lot of people love the smell of coffee, but they're wrong. You call it an acquired taste, I call it Stockholm Syndrome. You don't have to read the recipe every single time you brew a pot, said Sophie, jogging up with a few empty mugs of her own. She was a cadet like me and was mostly just a coffee girl like me. Trust me, she said, I've been drinking coffee for years and She caught a whiff of the pot I'd just filled and her eyes closed in aromatic pleasure. Wow, that smells amazing. Thank you, I said and smiled. What did I tell you? Coffee making genius. When you read the manual and follow the rules and measure things exactly, it will always turn out better than if you just do something by instinct. Always. I gave Sophie a fist bump of cadet solidarity, filled Commander Visco's mug, and rushed back into the command center. I said before that we were on Erden, but that's we in the communal sense. We, the Apocalypse Guard, had a presence in Erden. Most people think of the Apocalypse Guard, they think of the Power Riggers and their fantastical abilities, and yes, a bunch of those people were on Erden and up in orbit around it fighting the asteroid. The rest of us, the operators, scientists, engineers, medics, commanders, janitors, accountants, and cadets, were back on Earth using something called a dimensional tunneler to communicate with the riggers. We were doing it from an orbital space station, though, which is still pretty friggin' rad, right? I love this job. I gave Commander Visco her steaming mug of coffee and took the opportunity to look over her shoulder at the room's main screen, currently showing a view of the asteroid. One of our technicians had named the asteroid Droppy, which was why we didn't usually let our technicians name things. And that's all you get.
We will find a time to eventually release this book. It's interesting when you add us together, oftentimes things just get weirder. They get better, but they get weirder. You can actually go listen to my version of that chapter read at some point in the past, and you will find it's actually much worse. Adding us together really does enhance, but the problem is we go off the rails real fast in books the same way we go off the rails in panels. And so it's now, Dan's pitched it back to me, to fix the structure, really, is what we need. The magic system is part of that, but it's really the structure because the climax doesn't work anymore. It never worked. It still doesn't work. The character was broken in the original draft, and Dan fixed that because character is Dan's thing. And so now I've got to figure out how to make the structure actually work. which will be a project of mine coming up eventually.
What I love about it, though, and if you go and find his original thing, then obviously you'll be able to compare and contrast them and do your whole like English essay on it. But reading that, I can't really tell what is me and what is Brandon, because I think we managed to combine our two styles pretty well.
My voice for this book was already, Emma was a little goofy, and that Dan just picked right up on that, and just it was instant. Like the voice was a little off in the first one. If you reading those, it was trying a little too hard to both be dynamic and funny, and it turns out just nudging it a little more self-effacing funny made the whole thing work, and the characters just snapped together, and so the kind of just slightly off sense of the characterization ended up really working. But I had known that the magic was broken when I gave it to Dan, and I'm like, will you fix this? And then Dan came back and said, you know what, this isn't the sort of thing I fix. This is the sort of thing you fix. So we will find a time for that eventually. It made a really good read aloud. Maybe we should do it as an Audible thing or something like that. Or, all right, I'm going to read you guys from Stormlight.
And I'm going to roll my eyes like this.
So reading from Stormlight Books gets a little challenging because I don't want to spoil the previous 3 volumes too much. And so I'm going to read to you from one of the interludes. This is going to be Lift's interlude for Rhythm of War. And if I run across something that I feel is too spoilery, I will self-edit. That might throw me for a loop for a second. But here we go. As Lift hung from the ceiling, dangling precariously from a rope with one hand, reaching out with the other toward the basket, she was forced to acknowledge that stealing food just didn't give her the same thrill as it once had. She continued to pretend because she didn't want her life to change. She hated change. Stealing people's food was basically her thing. She'd been doing it for years, and she still did get a thrill when she saw their starving faces. They'd open the drawer, or their chowder wrap was gone, or they'd pick up their plate and find it empty. They'd adopt the most sublime moment of cross-eyed panic and confusion. And then they'd smile and look to see where she was. They didn't see her, of course. She was way too good at hiding. But they'd look, and they seemed fond. You weren't supposed to be fond when someone stole from you. Ruined the entire experience. Then there was this. She stretched a little further, fingers brushing the basket. She swung on her rope, stretched out, and there, she snatched the basket. She stuffed the handle between her teeth and scuttled back up the rope, vanishing into the hidden labyrinth of small tunnels that latticed the ceilings and walls of the tower. Up here, Wendell waited, coiled up upon himself and making a face out of vines and crystal. "Oh," he said, "a full basket. Let's see what she left you this time." "Ain't nobody leaving me nothing," Lift snapped. "I stole it, unfair and square." "Also, hush, someone might hear." "They can't hear me, mistress. I hear you, so hush, whiny spren." She crept away from the hole, pushing the basket ahead of her as she crawled through the small tunnel. The next intersection was a tight squeeze, but she could make herself slippery with Stormlight, so she got through. 2 turns and a straight crawl later, they entered a small intersection of tunnels where she'd left a sphere for light. The roof of the tunnel was a little higher here, letting her settle down with her back against the stone so she could inspect her prize. Wendell came in on the ceiling, taking the shape of a growing vine that crept across the stone. He formed a face again right above her, looking down as she pulled open the basket and began rifling through it. Flatbread, some curry, sugared mashed beans, a little jar with a cute face drawn on top, along with the horn-eater symbol for love. Looked like jam inside. Lift looked up at the ceiling and the blinking vine face hanging from it. "All right," she admitted. "Maybe she left it out for me." "Maybe?" "Starving, stupid horn-eater woman," Lift grumbled, slathering jam on the flatbread. "Her dad knew how to make it look like an accident, leaving stuff out so I could take it. Let me storm and pretend." She stuffed the bread into her mouth. Damnation, it was good. Only made the experience more humiliating. "I don't see the problem, mistress," Wendell said. "That's 'cause you're a dummy spren," she said, then stuffed the rest of the flatbread into her mouth, talking around it. "I do too like fun in my life," he said. Last week I displayed the most beautiful art installation of chairs from around the tower. The others thought it quite majestic. They complimented the stools in particular. Liv sighed, leaning back against the wall, and just slumped there. Not really angry, not really sad. She was just Blarglegorf. Supremely Blarglegorf. Storms, the wrap she wore underneath her shirt was really starting to itch today. Come on, she said, grabbing the basket and sphere, then moving on through the tunnel's innards. Is it really so bad? Wendell said, following. Cord likes you. That's why she leaves things out for you. I'm not supposed to be liked, Liv snapped. I'm a shadow, a dangerous and unseen shadow moving mysteriously from place to place, never seen, always feared. A shadow. Yes, a starving shadow, all right. She had to squeeze through the next tunnel, too. Stupid, stupid, stupid. This tower here, it's like a big old corpse, and I'm like blood sneaking around through its veins. Why would a corpse have blood in its veins? Fine, it's not dead, it's sleeping, and we're its storming blood, all right? I should think, Wendell said as she squeezed through another tight fit. These air vents are more like intestines, so the allegory would make you more akin to, feces, I guess. Wendell, she said, pulling through. Yes, mistress? Maybe stop trying to help with my deezy metaphors, all right? Yes, all right. Storming lamespren, she muttered, getting to a section of air vents that were larger. She did like this tower. There were lots of places to hide and places to explore, particularly if you were a person of this smaller variety. Up here in this network of stone ventilation shafts, she found the occasional mink or other scavenger, but it was really just her domain. The adults were too big and the other children too frightened. Plus, she could grow when properly glow when properly fed, and her awesomeness could get her through tight squeezes. When she'd first started exploring up here, there hadn't been nearly as many of those as there were now. Stupid, stupid, stupid. They eventually reached her nest, an opening where 4 ventilation shafts met. Here she'd piled up blankets, food stores, and some treasures. One of Dalinar's knives she was absolutely sure he hadn't wanted her to steal. Some interesting shells. An old flute that Wendell said looked strange to him. They were near a well where she could get water, all the water she wanted, but far enough away from population that she could talk without feeling like people could hear her. The previous nest she'd made before moving had let her listen in on echoes of people nearby, but they'd been able to hear her as well. She'd heard them talking about the echoing in the ventilation shafts, the spirit of the tower, they'd said. And that had been nifty at first, but then they'd started leaving out stuff for her, like she was like the Stormin' Night Watcher. And she'd started to feel guilty. You can't be taking stuff from people who don't have much to give. That was the first rule of not being a total and utter useless piece of choldong. She munched on some stolen food from her basket, then sighed and got up. She stepped to the sidewall, putting her back to it. Come on, she said, do it. Wendell moved up the wall. As always, he left a trail of vines behind him. Those would crumble and decay soon after, but for a short time could be used to mark something, like the height of a girl standing beside the wall. He moved across the wall atop her head, then she stepped back and marked the line with a more permanent one out of chalk. It's almost a full inch since last time, she said. I'm sorry, mistress. She flopped down in her nest of blankets, wanting to curl up and cry, but she didn't because she was storming weak. Or she didn't do that because she was storming weak. Instead, she took off her shirt, then undid the wrap around her chest and redid it tighter. I'll stop eating, she said. That'll stunt my growth. You stop eating. I could do it. She pulled the wrap tighter, then put her shirt back on. Then she just lay and stared up at the marks on the wall, showing the progress of her height over the last 8 months. Mistress, Wendell said, curling up like an eel and raising a vine head beside her. He was getting better at making faces, and this one was one of her favorites, had little vines that looked like mustaches. Don't you think it is time you told me what exactly you asked the Night Watcher? Doesn't matter, she said. It was all lies. The boon, the promises, lies, lies, lies. I have met the Night Watcher, Wendell said. She does not think the same way the rest of us do. Cultivation created her to be apart, to be separate from mankind, unconnected. She wanted to create a daughter whose shape and personality would not be influenced by the perceptions of humans. This makes the Night Watcher less, human than a spren like myself. Still, I don't believe her capable of lying. It isn't something she could conceive of, I believe. She's not the liar, Liv said, closing her eyes. Storm, she'd made the wrap too tight. She could barely breathe. It's the other one, the one with the dress like leaves merging into the underbrush, hair like twigs, skin the color of deep brown stone. So you saw cultivation herself. That is rare, Liv shrugged. I had suspected it was true. Your situation is unique. Why, seeing into the cognitive realm even a little is an uncommon feature in a human, I'm turning food into Stormlight. Well, you're special, Lift. I didn't want to be special, says the girl who just earlier was comparing herself dramatically to a shadow. I just wanted what I asked for, which was not important now. I rather think it is. I asked not to change, Lift whispered, opening her eyes. I said, when everything else is going wrong, I want to be the same. I want to stay me, not become someone else. Those are the exact words? Wendell asked. Best I can remember. Wendell said, snuggling down into his vines. I believe the problem is how vague you were. I wasn't vague. I told her. Make me so I don't grow up. That is not what you said, mistress. And if I might be so bold, having spent a great deal of time around you, I should tell you that you are not an easy person to understand. I asked not to change, so why am I changing? You're still you, just a bigger version. She squeezed her eyes shut again. Mistress, Lift, will you tell me why this bothers you so much? Everyone grows, everyone changes. But I'm her little girl. Whose little girl? He asked gently. Your mother? Lift nodded. Stupid. It sounded stupid, and she was stupid. Mother was dead, that was that. Why shouldn't she said the right words? Why hadn't cultivation just understood? She was supposed to be some sort of starving god. It was her fault if a little girl came and begged for a promise, and the god deliberately misinterpreted and Lift liked who she was, who she had been. She wouldn't be the same when she got older. And we will stop there.